I'm going to introduce the first of our plenary talks, and this is a legend in her own right, Ivanka, talking about visual identity.
Wicked. Legend. Brilliant. Good afternoon. I hope you're not too sleepy. I'm not delighted with the scheduling to get the first plenary on the first day straight after lunch, to be given only 15 minutes, 7 of which got stolen. I'm not known for being succinct. I like telling stories, so I'll do my very best to get to the 2:15 finishing time. So I think what it says on the schedule is design guidelines. That was a title that was given to me in a time-honoured tradition of not doing exactly what I was told. I have slightly changed what I'm talking about. We've got sessions scheduled. There's one on Wednesday, one on Thursday, that do a very much deeper dive into brand guidelines and what they mean and how to use them. And it would be, I think, quite foolish of me to try and cover any detail of that in a 50-minute plenary slot. What is important is that we start talking about and understanding the importance of our visual identity. People talk about branding, and I could talk for hours in many different flavors about what brand is, what it means, how you get one, how people begin to understand it. The important thing about this plenary and some of the sessions we've got scheduled this week is about visual identity. It's about being recognized, and it's about forming good habits. We need to get into the habit of caring that we present our visual identity uniformly and in a recognizable way. So I'm in Orlando and I've been driving around, and it's impossible to avoid things like this. This is a very clear example of a visual identity working. It doesn't take more than 3 circles for you to know exactly what this relates to. This is a much more overt and obvious execution of the same sort of thing. But what matters with visual identity has many different elements. It involves color, it involves shape, it involves font, it involves lots of different elements that come together and make somebody go, I know exactly what that is, I know what product it is, and I know whether I like it, whether I want to use it. And it immediately reminds us of the relationship we have with a certain thing. There are lots and lots and lots of things out there in this world vying for our attention. Attention is something that's very expensive. Getting me to spend time recognizing something that you're doing, that someone else is producing, is very hard. It's a very competitive landscape out there, and we need to stand out. We need to be recognized for who we are. People, the minute they see anything that we work on, they should immediately be able to know that it relates to Ubuntu. So, questions from me this time. How many people here have read the brand guidelines? Wow, quite a good number. How many of you know, where are they? Where do they live? Where was that? Google. So what was it? design.canonical.com. We've put together a number of different documents, files, asset, elements that comprise our brand identity on design.canonical.com/toolkit. I was going to try and organize some prizes, but with Mark's ice cream, I didn't really want to start competing with food analogies. So yes, design.canonical.com/toolkit. If you come away from this session with nothing else, please remember that site. The design team is very, very small in relative terms. There are really only 3 people who work on visual identity, on visual branding, and they cannot be scaled to the vastness of what we're trying to do. It's really important to me that that I and my team provide things that help you work on your own, that help you get it right, that help you form those good habits. So we need you not just to look at them, but also to ask us questions, to make sure that we're always keeping them at a standard that is useful to you, that they're things that you can actually use in your day-to-day work. I put this in just because it's nice and it's orange. It serves no purpose whatsoever. But it's not all about the orange. This is orange, and this is also orange, and so is this, and this. But orange is definitely quite an important part of it. This is also orange. This is a bit better, you might say. This is also orange. But for us, it's about the right orange, the right way. They've got it right for their chocolate factory. For our chocolate factory, we look at things slightly differently. Come on. For us, it's not just about the orange. It's about the orange, the grey, the white, the aubergine, the font, the shapes, everything that we do, the tone of voice, the quality, that all those elements will form part of our brand, will form part of what people form the relationship with. All those bits matter. So we've done a bit of this that you all have now. Why does it hate me so much? This. All these things are slowly coming together and forming a recognizable visual identity. This is about Ubuntu, the product, the thing that those consumers will be looking out for, the things that they will recognize. So going back to my starting message about helping you to help me to help you, I need you to understand a little bit about what's in those guidelines. As I said, I'm not going to dig into the details, but we need to give our brand space to breathe. We need to care about the little details. Marcus, where's Marcus? There's Marcus at the front. He's put a lot of effort into thinking about how much space there needs to be around the logo every time it's used, how far apart it is from the next elements on the page, how all those little different elements, the font, the shapes, the logos, the colors, all come together and create a consistent, legible brand identity. In these early days of us bedding this identity in, we will have to call red card on certain things occasionally, like not using the right aspect ratio in a plenary, little things that just slightly undermine all that effort that has gone into making those elements sharp. But we also need them to be red carded ourselves. Somebody sent me a brilliant email, very timely yesterday, pointing out to me that, I don't know what's making me make noise. Pointing out to me that the text, we've guidelined this logo, and the text describing doesn't match the picture. All of us, how many hands went up? Maybe 100 hands went up. We've all read them, and none of us have noticed. One of the powerful things about open source is that many, many eyes aspect, the many eyes being attributed to quality. We need those many eyes, not just on the bugs in the code, but we also need them on the bugs in the guidelines. So for that reason, I need you to tell us if we've missed a spot, and we will extend you the same courtesy. So for this reason, we've got a project on Launchpad specifically for finding bugs against the guidelines. So please use it, and we'll try and get everything addressed as quickly as possible. And that's it. Are there any questions?
Cool. I think you've got like a minute if you want to take a question.
Brilliant. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, so next up is a man who will be familiar to you all as well. Rick Spencer, talking about gifting.
Did you see how easy that was? Plug it in, push a button. All right. Okay, so I'm not talking about quickly. I've stood up here for the last 4 releases and talked about quickly. If you're going to take one word away from this brief presentation, it would be thank you. And just want to thank this awesome community for just being here and letting me be part of it and base my life around it. And let me touch on why, one perspective why I think this community is so special. And I think it's because it puts into practice something I intellectually understood and strove for before I joined the Ubuntu community, which is being a culture of gifting. And there's some cultures in the world, the ones that we're familiar with in the West, which are exchange-based cultures, where the economy is based on you give something to somebody, and the result, your expected result of that is that something is going to flow back to you, right? So a gift creates an opportunity to get something back. It creates a debt. But there's a lot of cultures that aren't like that, where a gift is a gift. And it has its own economy and its own way of working. And I purport that Ubuntu, when it's working at its best, that's the kind of culture that we have, and it makes it such a wonderful place to be. And I started to think through it. I'm a very hierarchical thinker, and I traced it back to the base. I think it actually started with the base of free software. If you look at the 4 freedoms, which I didn't list here, but the preamble to the 4 freedoms, he says, when you write software as a developer, when you do something technical and you release that, the freedoms don't defend you as a developer. The freedoms are for your users, right? I mean, it's very powerful. And you're locked away from being able to demand anything in the future. It's almost like a gate, you put it out there and you have gifted that. And at that point, nobody owes you anything except to perpetuate that gifting. It's very humbling. It's very, and it's also, it's rewarding and it's liberating, because you can opt out of keeping track of who owes you what and who's done what to you. You just did your thing, you gave it away, and you can just take all the pleasure and somebody else getting use out of it. And then, if you look at the Ubuntu Manifesto, it also starts out the same way. The Ubuntu Manifesto doesn't define how we will work, or it doesn't define our rights as developers. It defines our users' rights. It's about why we're doing this and what benefits accrue to them. It's not really until you get to the code of conduct that it starts talking about the way we personally should behave, right? So it's at this very leaf node level of practice before we're even talking about ourselves. Up to all that, it's all predicated on the thought that we're doing this work for other people, and once we release it to them, it's theirs. And I see this repeated over and over again in our community, and it makes me really happy and proud to be part of it. It's transformative. And I think it's transformative for other people too. I read a lot of blogs and stuff about Ubuntu and free software, and you'll often run into people who are really, really surprised where they weren't told to RTFM. People just came in and gave them help. And sometimes people get a lot of help from pretty anonymous people on the internet. Someone who it's just not physically possible for any benefits to accrue back to the gifter. They're just anonymous through a forum or something. Think of the impact that this has on people. You're trying something new, and somebody for no reason, no benefit to themselves, helps you a lot with it. How's that going to change just that one day? You get home from work, how are you going to treat your family differently? It's powerful, it's very potent. I love this part of Ubuntu. And I think it rips to other places where we practice, in our bugs. I'll often see bug reports where somebody's upset. And sometimes rightly so. They're very upset, but they're used to being treated pretty badly by developers or their technical staff. And they may say something and then be surprised that even though they were a little snitty or that they're treated back with kindness. And this is a very powerful part of Ubuntu. Our bug tracker, no matter what flame wars start, no matter what defaults I've changed in evolution, they always get back to people, saying, hey, everyone chill out, everyone means well here. And I think this makes people want to keep coming back to this community and makes it more and more inclusive. And I think the way that we respond to trolls also, like our lack of response, or this is something very powerful that I see in Ubuntu, is that we don't troll other communities. We don't, I think it's frustrating for people who try to troll us sometimes because they don't get a response, or they get like a very thoughtful response, which like expressed a lot of kindness towards them. And that's potent. So I just want to say thank you. And this being part of Ubuntu really changed my life. And as long as it stays a gifting culture like this, I'm going to keep basing my life around it, and I'll keep going back. Mark, that's the Grinch. His heart grew 3 sizes too big, and it actually broke the measuring device. And sometimes that's how I feel when being part of the community. So that's it. Thank you. When's my birthday? Did you guys, I'm 42 this year.
Yay, old. All right, so next up, we've got possibly the smallest and most incredible man in design, Matthew Paul Thomas. He's going to be talking about the Ubuntu Software Center and the future of the universe. MPT. Let's try and put this thing on you. No rush. Take your time.
Good afternoon. 6 months ago, Mark started us talking about crossing the chasm, how Ubuntu can get beyond technology enthusiasts and their friends and families to other early adopters, how we can get from somewhere in the region of 12 million users to hundreds of millions of users, how Ubuntu can do for operating systems what Firefox has done for web browsers. So how do we cross this chasm? Well, you may have your own theory about this, but this is mine. Ubuntu needs to be useful, desirable, gettable, and keepable. Useful in that it does things that people need or want to do. Desirable, people prefer doing those things on Ubuntu rather than any other system. Gettable, people know how to get Ubuntu and install it, or more likely they buy it pre-installed. And keepable, people can keep using Ubuntu for months and years on end without trouble. Now, there's a whole universe of issues and problems that we need to tackle to address these 4 basic requirements. And if you're working on any of these things, what you're doing is important. So if anyone tells you all Ubuntu needs now is games, or all Ubuntu needs now is advertising, they are looking at just a tiny part of this universe. And you'll hear a lot this week about Unity, but the truth is that Unity is only a tiny part of this universe as well. Because Unity will be most successful if it is so simple and unobtrusive that people barely even notice that they're using it. Nobody's going to turn on a computer so that they can use Unity. People turn on a computer so that they can do things. So with that in mind, today I'm just going to look at the first quarter of this chart. How do we make Ubuntu as useful as possible? To some extent, this comes from properties of the base platform. Hardware support, networking, printing, battery life, startup speed, accessibility, things like this. A few of these things we are testing and tracking in an automated way, but most of them we aren't yet. Most of them, whenever they go wrong or whenever they get worse, the only way we find out is by accident, by ad hoc testing. So as Mark said this morning, we should do more automated testing. I look forward to finding out how people here plan to automate more of this testing. The rest of usefulness comes from applications. Applications are what lets people do things with Ubuntu that we could barely imagine. So how are we doing when it comes to applications? Well, 6 years ago, the first version of Ubuntu, Ubuntu 4.10, had 375 graphical applications in the standard software channels. And over the past 6 years, this number has steadily increased pretty linearly. And in Ubuntu 10.10, we have 2,351 approximately. But unlike the real universe, the Ubuntu universe does not exist in a vacuum. Here's Android over the same time period. 2 years and 1 week ago, the Android market started out from 0, and a couple of hours ago, they announced that they have just reached 100,000 applications. Let's scale down the graph again, because here's iOS. July 2008, the App Store opened from 0, and today it has over 300,000 applications. This is a big difference. Now, there are several explanations you might make for this difference. You might say, for example, that, well, a lot of those Android and iOS applications are crap. Right? But that doesn't seem to be true, at least according to Android users themselves. Only 28% of the ratings they give to applications are saying that the application is crap. You could say, well, applications don't really matter anymore. Everything's moving to the web. But I don't think that's really true either, because that's what Apple thought when they first released the iPhone 3 years ago. And they pretty quickly realized that it was a mistake because developers didn't like that. And that's what Google thought when they first announced Chrome OS. But it seems to me that Chrome OS has been pretty much sidelined by Android. You might also say the opposite, say, well, a lot of those mobile applications are applications specifically to replace particular websites because the websites are so difficult to use on a mobile browser. But that argument doesn't apply to the iPad. The iPad is the dark blue line there. And even that has shot past Ubuntu and now has 35,000 applications after only a few months, more than 10 times the number Ubuntu has. Next month, Apple is going to open the Mac App Store to application developers. And in the next version of Windows, we can reasonably expect to see a Windows Store as well. We've taken 6 years to get just over 3,000 applications. How long do you think it will take for them to get 10 times as many? A month? 2 months, maybe? There's something terribly wrong here. Now, this does not mean we should give up and go home. It does not mean we should panic. But nor does it mean we should just ignore this problem or say, well, we'll think about that in 2012 or 2013 or 2014. No, we need to figure out what's going wrong now and fix it now. So, what does it take to attract tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of great applications to Ubuntu? 5 things. First, we need an initial user base. Of course, this is a bit of a chicken and egg problem, but the more users Ubuntu has, the more those users can give application developers their appreciation or their money or both. And with Ubuntu, we have somewhere in the region of 12 million users who can do this. So far, so good. Second thing we need is a great developer platform. It needs to be not just easy, but even fun to write an Ubuntu application. So how are we doing here? Well, let's look at the websites, for example. This is the website for if you want to write Windows applications. Plenty of information here. This is the website for if you want to write Mac applications. Here's the one for iOS. Here's the one for Android. Here's the one for Palm WebOS. The website for if you want to write Ubuntu applications looks like this. But even if this site was up and running, what would it say? What would we say, for example, to someone who wanted to add audio to their application? What would we say to someone who wanted to add spell checking to their application? What would we say to someone who wanted to draw a chart inside their application? What does it say that the Unity developers have developed an entire widget toolkit of their own, plus a replacement for one of the standard GNOME libraries, just so that they could implement things that should have been easy already? We're in bad shape here. Ubuntu became popular with millions of end users, partly because we made smart, opinionated decisions about which applications to ship by default, and we gave special care and attention to those applications. If we're going to be successful with application developers, we need to put just as much effort into frameworks and APIs. How might we do that? I don't know, but I want to find out. Third thing we need is easy software packaging. In Ubuntu, we have a team of 161 universe contributors who spend their spare time packaging software, mostly other people's software. Now, why do we do that? Well, it's because we're a Linux distribution, and that's what Linux distributions do, right? Yes, but why do they do that? Two main reasons. Firstly, because until now, every Linux distribution has been so unpopular that hardly any application developers actually cared whether their software was easily installable on that distribution. So the distribution developers had to take up the slack. Fortunately, Ubuntu is now popular enough that this is starting to change. But the second reason is that packaging software for Ubuntu is a lot more difficult than packaging software for Windows. So for everyone here who has ever packaged software, the first thing I'd like you to think about is how can we make this easier? Maybe we need to make deb packaging easier. Maybe we need to have a separate package format for third-party applications. Ubuntu universe contributors will play a vital role in Ubuntu for years to come. But if we want to get even 50 times as many applications as we have now, even 50 times as many open source applications, can anyone seriously believe that we'll find 50 times as many universe contributors? Not 160, but 8,000 people who want to spend their spare time packaging other people's software. So there are several sessions at UDS about this. Fourth thing we need is easy publishing of software. In Ubuntu, the standard process, if you want to get a new application into Ubuntu, takes between 2 and 8 months, depending on what part of the release cycle you had. If it's the day before feature freeze, it's 2 months. If it's the day after feature freeze, it's 8 months. Now, in contrast, iOS developers complain if their application doesn't get into the App Store within a week. So we've developed two processes to get around this. One is the backports process. The other is the application review process. Neither of them are being used particularly well at the moment. So there are sessions on this afternoon. The fifth thing we need is easy installation, feedback, and revenue. Here, finally, we get to Ubuntu Software Center. All of this to point out that if you think Ubuntu Software Center is the linchpin of Ubuntu or the future of Ubuntu, you too are looking at just a tiny part of the universe. 1 month ago, we released Ubuntu Software Center version 3.0. This is a big step forward in several ways. It's faster, it's prettier, the search works better, it lets you install add-ons for applications, it has a history of past transactions, and most importantly, perhaps, it lets you buy software. Right now, we have, I think, 2 applications in the store, another 2 on the way. We're looking to accelerate this very quickly. So we owe a big thank you to our amazing team of contributors. If any of you would like to help out with Ubuntu Software Center, please come and talk to one of these people. We're very friendly, and there's lots of things we want to do. Our short-term goal for Ubuntu Software Center 3.1 is ratings and reviews. But beyond that, there are many other things we'd like to do for 4.0. But in the meantime, your homework for today is to think, how can we improve our developer platform? How can we make packaging easier? And how can we make publishing easier? Thank you.
All right. I think, aren't you both doing this? Oh, is it just you? Oh, okay. So finally, great job from MPT. Finally, we've got Evan, and he's going to get up and talk about the restaurant at the end of the universe. Big round of applause for Evan.
Right, so following Matthew, possibly not my best decision ever. That was quite the presentation. I think that deserves another round of applause for Matthew. Right. So I just want to spend a brief period of time today talking to you about where we're at right now, where we should be moving towards, and how we can reduce the barriers and the roadblocks in our path to getting there. So here's where we're at. This should all be quite familiar to all of you, right? We have the upstream developers create applications, they release them out onto the internet. Ubuntu then comes, takes the applications that they find interesting. Individual Ubuntu developers, individual Debian developers take applications, they package them up, they fix all the bugs that may be there, and they deliver them to users. As Matthew said, this takes anywhere from 2 to 8 months, depending upon where we are in the release cycle. Users, after those 2 to 8 months, get the applications, they play around with them, they find some bugs, they generate some feedback, and they deliver that back up through Ubuntu and back up to the upstream developers. Again, this takes 2 to 8 months plus some time for the users to send that information to us and for us to send that information to developers. This is an incredibly lossy process. There are a wealth of applications out there that we don't even know about because it hasn't piqued anyone's interest in the Ubuntu developer community to actually go ahead and package them. And the individuals writing those applications really have little recourse to getting those applications into Ubuntu. Equally, the bugs that are filed by our users, well, there is an immense effort to push these upstream. Not all of them ultimately make it up there. I think no one here has any illusions that all of the bugs that are reported in Ubuntu make their way back up to the upstream applications. So we have a problem, and I've really tried to rack my brain as to what we were missing here. And I tried to think, given the apps that we have, what are we missing? What are the killer applications that we use every single day that we're happy to talk to our friends about, that we actually go and tell people, oh my God, you've got to try Ubuntu because of this, right? And I really couldn't think of any. Sure, there's Firefox, there's the mail client, and there's a word processor, but really every platform has that. What we don't have is effectively an Angry Birds-like application for Ubuntu, right? Now, whatever you think of this particular game, it's been immensely successful. For those of you that don't know about it, it's generated millions upon millions of dollars in revenue and users, mostly through word of mouth. The chief developer of this application was just snatched up by EA, right? And it's a really simple game, and it didn't take very long to develop on the iOS platform, and I'm sure it didn't take quite long either to develop on Android. So, taking a quick step back, why is this, right? Well, we're spending an awful lot of time doing developers' jobs for them, right? I said at the beginning, we're taking applications, we're smoothing out the rough edges, we're patching these applications, we're packaging them up, and then we're delivering them to users. But this is actually handicapping developers, right? This is removing that direct communication between developers and users. Well, why are we doing this? It's obviously costing us a lot of resources, so surely there must be a reason. Well, it turns out the reason is that these are all very dangerous things, and they require years of experience. Dpackage runs as root. Equally, maintainer scripts in Debian packages have the full range of options that the shell provides them. So they can do anything on the system. Because they have maintainer scripts, that means they're non-atomic, which means that anything they do can't be undone. So of course we're scared. Of course we'll step in and say, we'll do the packaging for you, because we do not want to introduce our users into that world of hurt of a really bad packaging. But maybe there's another way to solve this. One that's actually scalable. Because if you look at this, as Matthew said, You know, if we hope to get to millions of users, hundreds of millions of users, hundreds of thousands of applications, we're not going to be able to do that with the Mode 2 alone. Well, what if we introduced static analysis, right? What if we introduced automated processes? If we do the same operation twice, we should be automating it. So let's identify the common problems that people make in packaging, in developing applications, isolate them, and put a layer between them putting an application forward to Ubuntu and that application reaching users, whereby the package and the software is evaluated through some automated process. Instead of it going to a human being and that human being having to review it, it then mostly goes through quite quickly. Now I have no illusions that this will solve all problems, that this will prevent buggy applications from getting into Ubuntu. But do we really prevent that right now? No. You know, I'm sure you can all think of applications that have been released in Ubuntu that have largely not worked. So this does not purport to solve that problem. This solves the problem that we will make a best effort in preventing bad applications from getting in, but once they're in, we need a different tack. So, we're in a position whereby developers are coming to us saying that they want to be able to push applications straight to users. You know, Firefox forced our hand. They were not happy with this model whereby we provide a bit of software and modify it and then deliver it to users. They wanted the product that they created going straight to their users. And we allowed them to do this because they're sufficiently large. But we should learn from that. Maybe it's really that all developers actually want this. Maybe they want to be able to stand on their own, to make their own mistakes, and speak directly to their users. So why don't we let them? How can we do that? Well, in the communication between developers and users, there's a rich amount of metadata being transferred back and forth. And we can leverage this metadata and change the sort order in Software Center so that the very best applications float to the top and the very worst applications are never even seen. We do this by taking the bug count of a particular application versus the number of users that have it installed. And if that ratio is particularly high, then the application floats to the top. If it's particularly low, the application floats to the bottom. We can do the same thing for crash reports. We can do more interesting things like take the amount of time between a bug being reported and its fix actually going into Ubuntu. And again, if that's particularly high, then the application floats to the bottom. If it's particularly low, then the application floats to the top. And most users will never actually see the poor applications. So instead of the application selection being determined by individual Ubuntu developers making their best guess as to the reliability of a particular application, it becomes a vibrant marketplace determining what is good and what isn't. But that's not enough. We can solve those problems, right? Those are tractable problems and we know about them. And I'm sure we have all of our own ideas as to how we will do that. But again, we should have no illusions that we know all the problems. Because the simple fact of the matter is, right now we're not talking to our developers. We don't know what issues they have with our APIs. We don't know what their needs are. We don't know why, for example, they're choosing Android over us, or iOS over us, or why they're even choosing us over those platforms. And until we actually start measuring that, until we actually start talking to our user base, we won't know that. So the other part of this is to actually do that. We need to engage with our developer community like we engage with our user base, so that we are creating a compelling platform, not for just end users to have the best experience, but developers as well, because developers are key to the end user's experience. So where does that leave us? So I said that we are going to kind of fundamentally shift the position of Ubuntu. Instead of being a downstream to the individual application developers, it then becomes an upstream. It provides a platform an SDK to developers to create absolutely amazing applications for users. Those developers then provide us feedback and feature requests through the mechanism I just described. The developers then provide software directly to users through our Software Center platform as fast as web applications are deployed, because at the end of the day, that is our competition moving forward. It needs to be that quick. Users at that same speed are able to provide bug reports back to developers. And this over here becomes a very tight feedback loop, as opposed to this 2 to 8 month wait on both ends. Users provide ratings and reviews and that other rich metadata that I talked about up to Ubuntu, and Ubuntu feeds that into the Software Center, and we provide those users, the operating system, and the Software Center platform to find the very best applications. So as Matthew said, it's about what you do with it. It's not about how pretty it looks or the overall platform. It's about the applications that enrich your life. And that's what this will do. And I hope you all have a think about this and talk to me and talk to other individuals and come up with your own ideas about how we solve these. Because, again, if we are going to scale to hundreds of millions of users, we are not going to do so with human beings at every critical point in every juncture. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Owen. So that's it. We're all set for another afternoon of sessions. So go forth and prosper.